If you're looking for an everyday knit hat that you can make with just about any yarn you already have, I have you covered with this one. This beanie is available in 9 sizes for both lightweight and medium weight yarn. The step-by-step tutorial is coming up. No matter which size or which weight yarn you choose, they all begin at the band with the long tail cast on. Since this pattern is available in so many sizes, you'll need to refer to the pattern for the specific number of cast-on stitches based on the size you want and the weight you're working with. To make it a little easier to read, the lightweight version is completely separate from the medium weight version. When you have the correct number of stitches cast on, lay your needles on a flat surface with the working yarn on your dominant hand side and make sure the braid is along the middle of the loop and not twisted in any way. Now, since we're working in rounds, we do need to keep track of the beginning of the round, so place a stitch marker here so you know which stitch is the first, and then we're going to continue with the band pattern. So knit the first stitch, and that's going to secure and join the round. The stitch pattern for the band is really simple. It's a knit 2, purl 2 rib. So we've already knit the first stitch. We'll knit the second stitch and follow that up with 2 purl stitches. And that's the repeat. Knit 2, purl 2. If you're wondering about the needles, every one of the sizes except for the preemies can be knit with a 16-inch circular needle that's measured tip to tip, but the preemie circumference is just a little bit too small. Now, if you have a 9-inch circular, which is typically for sock knitting, they're a little harder to find, you can definitely use one of those, or if you have a set of double-pointed needles, you'll need to use that in order to knit the preemie size. Okay, after you have repeated your knit 2, purl 2, and you've made it back to the stitch marker, pass it over if you're using a ring marker like I am here, or you can continue to mark the first stitch if you have a locking stitch marker. Now also, don't worry if you have a long gap like you see here. That'll sometimes happen with joining in the round, but after you knit a few rounds, it'll sort of close itself up, plus you can correct any uneven or messy joins with the tail when you weave it in. And continue the same repeat for the next round. Knit 2, purl 2. Now, for those of you who are completely new to knitting, it's really helpful to be able to identify a knit and a purl stitch so you can check your work as you go to avoid any mistakes. So when you see a stitch with a horizontal bar that's laying just below the needle or the cord, that's a purl stitch. When you don't see that, it's a knit stitch. So that's the repeat for the band. Knit 2, purl 2 for each round. And of course, the total number of rounds depends on the size you're making. So go ahead and refer to the pattern for that. Work through the band. Next, we'll look at the side pattern. Okay, so when you're finished with the band, it'll look something like this, and you're ready to transition to the hat side pattern. Well, this one is even easier than the band. You're simply going to knit every stitch in every side round. Again, the total number of rounds that you need to make depends on the size you're making, so refer to the instructions for that information. After that, you'll be ready to work on the crown. After you finish the repeat for the hat sides, you should have a nice stockinette stitch pattern that looks something like this. The crown pattern will consist of 2 different types of rounds, a decreasing round and a round with no decreases. So first, the decreasing round. You'll begin by knitting a number of stitches. You guessed it. The number is size dependent, so refer to the pattern for the size you're making to get the number of stitches you need to knit. And then here we'll decrease. The decrease you'll use is the knit 2 together. To make that, insert the needle through 2 loops, 2 stitches, and knit them as 1. Then proceed with your designated number of knit stitches, followed by another knit 2 together, and repeat. After finishing the decrease round, follow that with a round where you knit every stitch. That's the trend for the crown. Decrease round, followed by a knit round, and repeat. Also, a little tip here to help you keep track of your decreasing round. For every new decreasing round you make, you'll knit 1 fewer stitch in between those decreases. So if you started out knitting 11 stitches before you did a knit 2 together, the following decreasing round, you'll knit 10 stitches, the one after that, 9, 8, 7, and so on. Now, as you continue to decrease, eventually you'll get to the point where the stitches no longer stretch around your circular needles. When this happens, you need to do one of 2 things. Either switch to double pointed needles, or switch to a longer circular so you can work the magic loop. Since I already have a dedicated video on switching to DPNs, double pointed needles, which by the way, I'll have a link to that in the description below, I'm going to demonstrate how to continue the crown decreases with the magic loop. To make this as easy as possible, to work with the magic loop, you'll need another needle in the same size with a much longer cord, like a 32-inch or a 40-inch or even longer if that's what you can get. As you're transitioning, you'll need to keep up with the crown repeat, so your decrease round and your regular knitting round. And no matter where you are within that repeat, when you get to the point where you need to transition to the longer circular, you'll do so by working with 1 needle from each circular. Now, I tend to prefer to use locking stitch markers instead of ring stitch markers when I knit magic loop, so that's why I'm switching to a different stitch marker here. You can use whatever you prefer. Now, the next step, you can be really exact, or you can sort of eyeball it. So for the magic loop, the stitches need to be split in half. So half of the stitches are on one side and half are on the other. Now I'm going to eyeball it here just by folding my work in half and guesstimating where the halfway stitch is, but you can certainly divide the total number in half and count it out if you prefer. Then grab the cord and pull it through. Feed the stitches on the new needle, we'll call it, and pull the back needle through. Now pull that so you have enough slack to knit with, but don't pull it so far that you pull it all the way through. You need to have some cord on the opposite side for the magic loop to work. Also, just be mindful of where you are within your crown repeat and make sure you're following that. So here's how the magic loop works. When you reach the end of a line of stitches, pull the cord through, then rotate it so the new needle is closest to you, and feed the stitches on the new needle. Don't worry if this is a little tough. Sometimes it is kind of hard to work the stitches on the needle to sort of work through that. And then pull the other needle that's at the back now, pull that needle through just so you have enough slack to knit with it. That sort of becomes your knitting needle, and continue with your pattern. So work your crown following the pattern for the size you're making, and lastly, we'll look at how to close it up and finish it off. When you get to that point, cut yourself a nice long tail and thread it on a yarn needle. Then insert that needle knitwise through the first stitch, pull it through, and slide it off the needle. Then simply repeat that for all the remaining stitches. Now, when you run out of stitches on one needle, pull the cord all the way through so the remaining stitches can be fed on the needle so you can continue to work in the same direction. When all the stitches are secured on the tail, pull it tight to draw it up, then use the yarn needle to secure the opening. I like to do this both on the outside and on the inside of the hat. Then don't forget to weave in the end along the band as well. Tidy up the join if needed and just weave it in along a row of knits on the inside of the hat. That's all for now, friend. Thank you so much for watching and especially for sticking with me until the end. If you're not already subscribed, please consider doing that if you like this sort of thing, if you want to learn more about knitting and crochet, or you're just looking for a new pattern to try. By subscribing, liking, and commenting, you can make a big impact in helping me continue what I'm doing and sharing this craft we both love. Happy knitting, and I'll see you in the next one.